Hi everyone. So today we're going to cover the first of the models, which is the moral model. A few things to keep in mind. The knowledge or terms of alcoholism really wasn't established until about 1849, 1850 by a Swedish physician who was looking for some way to describe people who had an unusual problem with alcohol. Something to keep in mind is that, like when Europeans came here, water was considered to be a fairly dangerous drink, and it was pretty inhospitable for you to serve it as well. So, pretty much everybody drank alcohol, and that includes young people. It was Yale or Harvard that used to have beer in their lunchroom because that was the main beverage. But if you think about that, everybody drinking, and that's pretty literally the way it was, there's always been those people who don't handle it properly, or they get out of control, or they start to act up, or something like that. So early on, we had what was known as the moral model of addiction, or the moral perspective. And this works in a couple of ways. Addiction or alcoholism in the early days, from the church's perspective, regarded alcoholism as a sin. And if you think about that, what they're emphasizing is personal choice, right? It doesn't involve addiction as we understand it today. So in reality, the churches regarded it as kind of a spiritual issue, or a sin for those that persisted. And you can still see that language. You don't hear it so much anymore, but the concept of spirits or demon rum or that sort of thing. Well, that came from that particular time period. I still remember, too, in the Catholic Church when I was a kid, you would sign a pledge, those people who had drinking problems. And that was a common form of treatment, to encourage you to stop drinking and to stop causing that sin. And believe me, there are still plenty of religions today that see it that way. I think our cultures, there's only a very few religions that still do. The other way is to look at, from the moral perspective, to look at alcohol problems as a type of crime. And that, too, emphasizes personal choice more than anything else. And let me give you an example, which is drunk driving. Now, it doesn't matter if everybody involved, including judges and attorneys and everybody else and yourself, it doesn't matter if they believe addiction is a disease, because some things just sort of supersede that belief. Drunk driving is very much one of those things. And you'll find that we have a way of treating this as personal responsibility also, in the form of laws and sentencing and consequences and everything else like that. So, in a nutshell, under this view, it points towards sort of a personal decision as the cause of the problem, and you can see that on your screen there. Both spirituality and personal responsibility. This leads us to a number of interventions, and that's what a good model does. If you have the concept, then there's some indication of how you can best approach the problem of alcohol consumption. And so you can see in the interventions there's spiritual direction, and that kind of goes along with what I was saying before about the Catholic Church and other churches too. People would pray for you and whatever else. Moral persuasion is, very much along those same lines, people making it clear to you that you are performing some kind of immoral act. And so there will be people who do encourage you to be sober. Now, those things are very much in line with 12-step programs because they emphasize spirituality very heavily, and they also really encourage sponsorship. And that's that moral persuasion in part, right? Somebody who's constantly working with you and will talk to you at any time about your drinking issues. And the last thing is social sanctions. And I mentioned drunk driving laws already as an example. Many states and cities used to have public intoxication as a crime. I'm sure there are some that still do, just for being drunk in public. Doesn't matter if you're causing a problem or not. But we had it way back too. At one time early in our history, you'd be denounced from the pulpit. And you would be basically socially shamed, at least in front of your congregation. Maybe even earlier than that was punishment like, say, the stocks, where you'd be put in a public square. And you know what stocks are. You put your head and your hands through there, and then people can come by and make fun of you and throw rotten vegetables at you or whatever else they had. I doubt they wasted too much food in that period of time. But listen, the moral model is still with us. That's the point. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In some cases, it's a necessary thing, in terms of laws, because we have to protect the community also, whether you're whether or not you have a disease. That can't be your excuse. And it's sad to note that the majority of people in jails and prisons in this country have drug and alcohol problems, not surprisingly. And for social workers, you'll find that the vast majority of your clients have problems with substances also. So when we look then at intervention agents, if these are the interventions, who are the proper persons or groups to work with those people? And so it's the clergy. It's people who you sponsor in 12-step groups, and it's law enforcement as well, law enforcement agents. And in a nutshell, that is the moral perspective. Be sure and remember that. I'm going to talk next about the temperance model, so don't get the two confused. We'll talk.